Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Thank you for joining me. It is the weekend edition, and happy Constitution Day. If you're listening to this on a Friday, that's September 17th. I know some of you listen to it over the weekend, so certainly we're going to talk about some of those issues of the Constitution and religious liberty, and also the fact that we have a few people in office that aren't convinced that we should follow the Constitution in terms of course, everything from amnesty to whether or not we should actually address the issue of the border, vaccine mandates, and much, much more. So we have a lot to cover. In studio, always, Penna Dexter, Kelly Shackelford, and Penna, happy Constitution Day.
Have you heard about any parades or celebrations in Washington, D.C. of Constitution Day?
I have not seen any of those, but I did see something from Kelly Shackelford. He was talking about Coach Kennedy. You might remember he's the coach up there in Bremerton, Washington. I've been there before and know exactly what the town looks like. I went to the 50-yard line after the game was over, and I said a quiet prayer. But this piece from Kelly Shackelford says, Judge says Coach Kennedy prayed wrong. I don't see that in the Constitution where a federal judge can tell you how to pray. Tell me about this.
Well, Coach Kennedy's had obviously issues in the case, just period. But we went all the way up to, again, for those who don't know, Coach Kennedy's the coach who was fired for going to a knee to say a prayer after the game was over by himself, silent prayer. And unfortunately for Coach Kennedy, he lives in the Ninth Circuit. And the Ninth Circuit, of course, is in San Francisco. And so it's not exactly the most conservative circuit in the country, and they tend to make a lot of mistakes. And so what they did is they said coaches are not allowed to pray in public if anyone can see them, which, this is the new... I guess teachers are not going to be allowed to pray over their meals anymore. I mean, any government official, if anybody can see them, they can't pray. This is not the law. And so we were going up. We went up to Supreme Court once. They sent it back down for some more development. But the four conservatives said that the decision by the Ninth Circuit was beyond troubling and that it might need to be reviewed, which, hint, hint. It goes back down, get the same three judges, and they just double down on their, crazy ruling. But this time, a number of people in the Ninth Circuit said, hey, this might be worthy of an en banc, meaning instead of just three, we're going to get all the judges on the Ninth Circuit. Well, again, still a liberal circuit, but 11 judges write dissents. In favor
so they
of
didn't
Coach
take
Kennedy.
it en banc.
They didn't.
But these judges wrote dissents.
But the main guy who was on the panel and who also wrote the opinion for we're not going to take it en banc, not only does he say a lot of crazy stuff in the opinion, but he ends by saying that his theology is that you should pray in a closet. And that since Coach Kennedy was praying in public, he was being a bad Christian. And so this is part of his opinion, okay?
I can't believe this.
So it's like, I don't think you're allowed to actually say, I'm a judge, you have to follow my religion. But
you have to pray the way I tell you to.
Yeah, but this is the arrogance of the judge. And I just think it's going to make it even more likely that the Supreme Court takes the case. But, Kerby, the reason you are seeing that is we just filed the appeal in the Supreme Court.
There we go.
And it's a really excellent brief. Paul Clement, who's probably the number one guy, if you can hire the best, you hire Paul at the Supreme Court. He's known as the very best for the Supreme Court. He's our lead counsel, and his team and our team together. I read the brief. One of the other things they attacked Coach Kennedy for was for being, quote, pugilistic. You think, well, what does that mean? Did he fight a judge? No. They're saying that when he was fired, he fought back. Mm-hmm. So evidently now, if your First Amendment rights are taken away from you and you file a lawsuit, the reason that they should rule against you is because you filed a lawsuit. I mean, this is just unbelievable stuff. You can't make this stuff up. But this is what they argued. And so, needless to say,
Don't they remember he's a Marine?
Evidently, they're against Marines too. I don't know, but it's a pretty amazing case. It's been going on for a number of years, but we're finally to the Supreme Court, and so I would encourage people to pray if they don't have information on it. I mean, even get information on what was just filed. They can go to firstliberty.org. They can go to pointofview.net. Share this with your friends because this is a really, really important case. It's not just about Coach Kennedy. It's about every person first who works for any government entity, your teachers, your coaches, your not just schools, everywhere. Because basically what they said in the opinion is that when you work for the government, all of your speech is government speech, and therefore they can tell you what you can and cannot say at all times. Even after a game is over, when you're by yourself going to a knee to say a silent prayer. Mm-hmm. Okay, this is how extreme this is. But if they can do that, then the government can pretty much do anything. So really important case, and the court will be deciding whether they take it.
Let me just mention, if you click on Kelly's picture, it takes you to First Liberty, and the pop-up actually shows a picture of Coach Kennedy holding a football, and then it says, "Let's go all in for Joe." So if you are not already receiving some of the material from First Liberty, it's right there on the website. Of course, you can go to First Liberty and find it either way.
You know, before we leave that, wasn't there a signal from the Supreme Court last time about another case that's been a precedent, Employment Division versus Smith?
Right.
And the free exercise clause. They wanted you to use that as the basis if you brought it back up. So that's what's happening, right?
Yeah, there's a bad case, the Smith decision, that's been in place for 35 years that is really pretty much, massively hampered the free exercise clause. So most times what people do who file religious liberty suits is they say, well, it's free speech and it's religious speech, and you have to win on free speech. Well, how sad, right? Well, so this case, when it went up the first time to the Supreme Court, the 4 conservative justices wrote a concurrence saying, yeah, go back down. There's some more facts to be developed. But by the way, we noticed that the first claim to reach us was a free speech claim, not a free exercise claim. But maybe that's because of the Smith decision that's caused so much damage to religious freedom over the last 30-some-odd years. And then they said, but we haven't been asked to review that decision yet. So not subtle. Nobody brought up Smith. Nobody mentioned Smith. They did. And they're basically hinting it's time to revisit this. And this, by the way, these are the 4 conservatives before Amy Coney Barrett was added to the court.
There you go.
So there's a real opportunity here, not only to rule for Coach Joe, not only to correct what's happening with everybody who's a coach, a teacher, who works for any government entity around the country, but this is really an opportunity to just completely open up free exercise protection again for all Americans. So it's a case that could have a lot of impact on our country.
Well, let's take a break. But again, we have that link to First Liberty. Just the other day, I had a chance to meet Coach Kennedy for the first time, shook his hand, and what a nice individual, the kind of person you'd want to coach your kids.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
So again, if you'd like to know more about that and its significance, we have that as our first article there on the website. We come back, a few people that we've interviewed here in the past. Michael Berry, there's back to another Marine. We're going to talk about these mandates and court packing with a couple of different guests. We'll talk about that right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
There are many modern conveniences we take for granted. Near the top of the list is light. To be more precise, we take for granted artificial light, except when our lights go out. But light as a product illustrates the benefits of modern technology. A story in Human Progress explains how light has turned from something too precious to use that's something everyone can afford. It used to take 10 hours a day for 6 days to produce 1,000 lumen hours of light. To put that in perspective, this is equivalent to one modern light bulb for just 54 minutes. When candles came along, this provided light for wealthier people, but that was prohibitively expensive for the common person. By the 18th century, candles made from the waxy substances in the head cavities of sperm whales were less time-consuming, but they were still expensive, not to mention terminal for the whales. George Washington even calculated the annual cost to him for the opportunity to have 5 hours of reading per night. The light bulb changed everything. By 1900, 60 hours of work could provide 10 days of light. 20 years later, 60 hours of work could pay for 5 months of light. Today, that same amount of work can produce 52 years of light. The amount of labor that once took 54 minutes of light now can buy 52 years of light. The cost has fallen by a factor of 500,000, and the quality of that light has been transformed from unstable and risky to clean, safe, and controllable. Sadly, many in other parts of the world don't have access to that light, which is even more reason for us not to take it for granted. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Go deeper on topics like you just heard by visiting pointofview.net. That's pointofview.net.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back once again, one of the things we so appreciate is the depth at First Liberty, because when we don't have Kelly Shackelford here, we have Lathan Watts, sometimes we've had Michael Berry, we had Jeremy Dice, we have all sorts of people. And so these next two articles we've posted, Penna, come from these individuals that work at First Liberty, answering some important questions that our listeners have been asking. So let's get into it.
Okay, well, one of them is Mike Berry, who I absolutely love it when he comes in to Point of View, and he is a Marine. He's still in the reserve, I think. Mm-hmm. And because of that, I think once he came to First Liberty, the organization built a whole sort of section on military cases. And what's happened now is because the Department of Defense has said all service members must receive the COVID-19 vaccine. And the only exception, I believe, is a religious exemption. And the calls that are coming into First Liberty, Kelly, I mean, Michael says in this article that we've posted that the calls are just very numerous, and that there is the legal right to seek a religious exemption. And I know that you've provided, even to non-military, but also to military, you provided the information on how to do it. And then if it's not successful, apparently they can actually ask for your help, right?
Yeah, there's if people go to firstliberty.org, at the very top they see this. It says Religious Liberty Protection Kit for Vaccine Mandates. And it says it's sort of whatever your situation, you can kind of follow that section. So military, there's a section. It has the laws that are involved. Let's say you're a student, has a section for that. Let's say you're a government, your employer is the government. Well, then there's a section for that. Or well, my employer's not the government, it's a private business. Well, that's there too. So it lays out for people, here's what your rights are, here's what the law is, and then it even provides exemption requests, examples that people have used. Now, people need to make it their own, but the point is it's all there. But one of the most, and so I bet everybody listening to this either has a situation or knows somebody that has a situation. It's really easy. You can
especially since last week's announcement.
Yes, you can go and get it and get the link and just send it or post it or whatever if people need help. Just really the information. I think the biggest problem is people don't know if there's even a place where they can figure out what their rights are. And they think, I can't go out and hire a legal team or whatever else. That's the whole purpose. But one of the more disturbing parts is what Mike Berry, and it's now, it's Lieutenant Colonel Mike Berry, actually,
Wow.
Not only Marine, but anyway, Mike is probably the most experienced lawyer in the military, on military law and religious freedom. Nobody's in his camp, really. He's argued more cases before the high military court than any other person in the military. So he's got a wealth of experience. Well, he's handling a lot of these, special forces families and others who are calling. What's going on is really disgraceful right now. Not only is there a pressure to force people to violate their religious beliefs if they have objections, but they're telling them things like, well, you can apply for it, but you're not going to get it. Nobody's going to get it. You can apply for it, but if you're not in a certain religious denomination, then that's totally unconstitutional. They can't force you to be in a denomination or in a certain belief. You can have your own belief, but certainly there's a lot of non-denominational people too. But one of the worst, I think, because this is, and I understand the mindset of just follow the orders is kind of the general approach. But you know what? You're being what they're doing there is unconstitutional. It's against the rule of law. It's against what they take an oath to when they serve the military. They're not thinking through this, but they're telling people that, well, even if you get an exemption, we're not going to give you any assignments. It's this bullying attempt to try to violate people's faith. And it's really unacceptable. I hope, I know I've seen Senator Langford and some others began to speak out on this, and I hope there's going to be some hearings on this, because there really does need to be, this needs to stop, because the law is in place. This is federal law. It's also the United States Constitution, and this shouldn't happen. People who are serving in the military, the idea, that you got people willing to, lose a leg, that are willing to lose their life, and the idea that you won't respect their religious beliefs is pathetic, especially when many of these people, not only do they have a religious belief, they have immunity. So you want to give them a vaccine, force them to take a vaccine that violates their faith and that does nothing but negative. If you have immunity, you're the Israeli study, 27 times greater protection. But yet everybody admits, I don't care what side they are, that there are negatives to adding a vaccine. Whether you think it's a small or a larger percentage, why would you introduce something negative when you already have immunity? So, there's a combination of just absolute foolishness going on here across the board. But in the military, it's really unacceptable when you have federal law that protects the right of people to a religious accommodation who serve in the military.
There was a movie that came out 5 years ago called Hacksaw Ridge. He quotes Desmond Doss in this particular piece. And so going all the way back to World War II, in that particular case, we're talking about Seventh-day Adventists, but it does seem to me that the military has always recognized religious issues and exemptions and questions like that. So this should not be any different than the history of the military over the last 200 plus years.
Yeah, well, let's make sure the listeners know that history, though. Desmond Doss was a guy who would not carry a rifle. And they so persecuted him, tried to run him out of the military, and even tried to court-martial him. Mm-hmm. He stood his ground. He did have a right to religious freedom. He won thankfully for our military, because then when he was up on Hacksaw Ridge and all these people were being killed and everybody came down, that same faith that made him not carry a rifle and have those beliefs was the same faith that made him so caring about life. And the result is he crawled on that field with all these people who were shot. He should have been killed 70 times, but he was dragging one by one those people, tying them up and lowering them down. He ended up saving over 70 people's lives. And afterwards, all those people who persecuted him walked up to him and said, "I'm sorry. I'm thankful that you have the beliefs you have. Thank you for what you did." So it's the same thing that's going on now. There are people who don't get it, who don't understand this country, who don't understand religious freedom, that are serving in the military, and they're trying to bully and pressure people to violate their faith. That is everything against what our Constitution and our history is about, and it shouldn't happen. And especially when you have law that specifically provides protection for people. So Mike Berry's article, I think, is really important, and what he's doing for so many of these great families and those who are serving. And many of them have said, look, I can't really say anything publicly because of my career, but somebody needs to speak up, on our behalf. And that's certainly what we're doing. I think some congressmen and senators hopefully will start to do that on the Armed Services Committee. But people need to know they have freedoms, and we're going to have to stand for these freedoms or they're going to be taken away.
Let me just mention it's the first article there, and it was a special to Stars and Stripes. My assignment for those of you that maybe have somebody that is in the military, you might want to pass that on to them, and you can read what Michael Berry has said about this.
I think this tool that's been provided by First Liberty, it's for the military. As Kelly said, it's for everyone that's having to struggle against a vaccine mandate. I listened to your First Liberty Live, Kelly, from yesterday, where Keisha Russell answered questions. And again, she reiterated that, you can get a religious liberty exemption, and you don't need to get in touch with anyone, really. You just use the materials, follow the instructions, and get the process started. And people, if they have a religious objection, and part of it is the how some of the vaccines are actually made with a fetal cell tissue, but also just if this violates your strongly held religious beliefs, you can get an exemption, and the tools are right there.
Let's take a break, and when we come back, we will hear a little bit from a piece by Jeremy, who's oftentimes on the program with us, and then we're going to get into this whole issue of amnesty, which has become much more significant because we have at least 10,000, some people are starting to say 12,000 people that are here illegally under the bridge there in Del Rio, Texas. I might give you a quote or two from the judge and the mayor there about that. Of course, we've been talking about vaccine mandates. Also have an indictment that came down. So there are just a lot of things to cover, and we will get back to those right after these important messages.
Having civil conversations about important issues seems to be harder and harder. Various media outlets tell people what they should believe, why they should be outraged, and getting people to actually think, well, it can be difficult. Whether it's the gospel, tax issues, social policy, or just about anything else, you need to have solid information and clear thinking to address the hard issues. You need God's truth applied. And that's what you get in less than 2 minutes with Point of View's Viewpoints Commentary, a daily resource to help you be informed and think through the things we need to be talking about. It is free and will arrive in your inbox each day when you visit pointofview.net/signup. Sometimes we know we should say something, but we're silent because we're not quite sure what to say. Viewpoints Commentary can help you break the silence and change the narrative. It can make you a more equipped agent for truth. Get your free subscription to the Viewpoints Commentary at pointofview.net/signup. Pointofview.net/signup. Point of View will continue after this.
are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Weekend edition, if you'd like to join the conversation, 1-800-351-1212. Penna Dexter, Kelly Shackelford. And you know how many times, even just in this week alone, that we've talked about cases going before the Supreme Court. We talked with Chelsea the other day about, of course, a case before the Supreme Court on abortion. We talked about, of course, the Texas heartbeat law. Just a minute, we're going to talk about amnesty. If indeed amnesty is granted, would that be part of the Constitution? And Penna, one of the things we've talked about before is that the progressives that recognize that they can't get anything through Congress anymore like they hoped they could, and they can't seem to get anything through a lot of these legislatures, have always depended upon the court, but now they're not sure they can get anything through the court. So here's a solution. We'll just add more Supreme Court justices so we can pack the court.
That's the progressives. It's been interesting this week because we've seen a few interviews with Justice Breyer, who the progressives are calling on to step down so that they can nominate, or so that the president can nominate a progressive to the court. So, you know, he said and he says it's bad. Court packing is not good. He says, after all, if one party can do it, two parties can do it. And then we've also seen statements by Amy Coney Barrett about the politicization of the courts. And that's what we don't want to see in this country. And Jeremy just did a fabulous piece called Decoding the Radical Left's Court Packers. Democracy is not what they claim it is. And they say, of course, that by packing the court, they're actually protecting democracy. And I think this has been a threat. We've been talking about it for months. But it's sort of popping up again because we've had two court decisions that the left really does not like. They don't like the fact that the Texas heartbeat law is still in effect, and that the Supreme Court didn't put any kind of injunction against it, and they've continued to try, and it hasn't happened. And they don't like the fact that finally the moratorium on evictions has ended, and the court has not kept it going as it did for a while. And so those are two, pieces of ammunition, I guess, that are giving the left ammunition to try to use that as an issue. And they do say that they're doing it to save democracy. And, you know, what they mean, this is what Jeremy says, what the left means by saving democracy is the last final push to consolidate political power and hold it permanently. Already in possession of the White House and Congress, the left perversely attacks the Supreme Court because it is the only remaining branch of government standing in the way of one-party rule. And that's really been the goal of the progressives. They don't want to have to win anymore. They just want to be in control.
Yeah, it's a really unique time, and we're in a small window right now in that we've had this ratcheting up because of the abortion decision, the Supreme Court denying the injunction on the new Texas law. And if you look, there were numerous Democratic leaders all of a sudden speaking up saying, we've got to do court packing. Also, though, the commission that the president appointed, the commission to reform the United States Supreme Court, they're going to be issuing their recommendation here in about a little over a month and a half. And so we're in this window where there's this real danger, where they're about to try everything they're about to try. And so we have really something people can do. We started working on this whole program as soon as the court packing attempt started because we knew, as a group that's defending religious liberty, what does it matter if there is no court? If the court is all politicized, it doesn't matter what your issue is, whether it's life, whether it's the Second Amendment, whether it's religious freedom, whether you name it, economic freedom, any of it, it's all gone. And so we started working on that. And one of the things in the commission, in the executive order that created this commission to reform the Supreme Court, it asked for the people of the United States to respond to the commission, to give their input. And so we have created, I think, an excellent statement that says, do not politicize the judiciary. And we have not only a lot of great leaders former Attorney General of the United States, Ed Meese, Franklin Graham. But what I love about it is we have people signing from evangelical leaders like Franklin Graham to Americans for Prosperity, which is not a religious or conservative social issues group. They're just for, free market economy. So you've got this really broad group, and we've even got Tea Party patriots. So it's really across the board. But I know a lot of times point of view listeners sit back and they think, well, what can I do? This is actually something you can do. We're up to 340,000 signatures. Join your signature with Ed Meese, former Attorney General of the United States, with all these leaders. And so you can, number one, how easy is that, right? You go to Supreme Coup, C-O-U-P, supremecoup.com. It's easy to sign on to the statement, which we will send to the commission on your behalf. But you can also sort of be a Paul Revere or a Paula Revere to your own people. If you go to supremecoup.com, there's all these memes. It makes it really easy for you to tell other people what's going on and say, I was on a phone call yesterday. I didn't know. One of the people on the call started promoting to everybody else, you need to go do this letter. She said, I did it. And everybody knows I'm conservative. And so when I put it, the meme on my, Facebook or whatever she put it on, she said, she took the meme that was Ruth Bader Ginsburg saying it was a bad idea. And she said, Ruth Bader Ginsburg and I agree on something. That's big news.
That is.
And of course, all of her friends were like, oh, wow. Right. And, but encourage others to sign this, because we need to really build the momentum and really send a message to the commission so that we don't lose our courts. Because if we lose our courts, we're done. And we've seen it with other countries. And, this is the danger zone that we're in right now. There's this geared up hysteria on the left. They're about to come down with this recommendation. It's the time for the people of the United States to speak up.
Well, if nothing else, kudos to your marketing team. I think I showed some of you, but if you haven't been out there, it seems like every time you click on an article, I'm seeing an ad for Supreme Coup. I had one at Washington Times. I had one at the beginning and one at the end. So, they're showing up everywhere. So it's a great way for you to do so. On our website right now,
it's easy, too. I did it.
Yeah, we have a link to Supreme Coup, but that unfortunately at the moment is taking you to First Liberty Live. It's hard to keep track of all the websites, so you'll have to use the Supreme Coup link, but we will provide that in just a little bit. But that one, unfortunately, takes you to First Liberty Live, but that was good. We just mentioned that with Akeisha, so that's a great material as well. I just want to keep moving because, if nothing else, we have 10,000, some people say now as many as 12,000 migrant individuals. It's called a migrant camp under this local bridge. This is in Del Rio, Texas. Now, the mayor is Bruno Lozano. Now, if you're not familiar with him, he is, first of all, a Democrat. Second of all, obviously Hispanic with that name, but also a fairly prominent LGBTQ leader. Matter of fact, he served in the military under Don't Ask, Don't Tell. And there's actually, I think it was a TV program where he was featured. So he is a person that probably wouldn't agree with some of the things we say around this table, but he is, as a Democrat, calling for the president to address this crisis of over 10,000 to now some people saying maybe as much as 12,000 migrants just under this bridge. And so Joe Biden has a solution. Let's just provide amnesty. What about this?
Well, they're under the bridge because, and just a few days ago, maybe a week ago, there were about 700 to 1,000 people under the bridge, and they were being taken care of each day. But these people coming in from Haiti are being sent back. And all of a sudden, the Biden administration says we're no longer going to fly these people back and deport them back to Haiti. And so they're calling their friends and they're telling them, come on down. So it's filled up now. And I heard 10,000 and now you're saying it's 12. It's an awful situation under there. And so the idea to give them all amnesty now, that's just another idea of the left. And, He's actually made a promise not to deport these migrants during his campaign. He made that, and now he's, I guess, fulfilling his campaign promise. But it's terrible for public health and the national security of the United States. And it's just a logistical nightmare in addition.
You know, the question was asked the other day in the press room of the White House press secretary. Now, let me understand. If you don't get vaccinated, you can be fired from your job. But if you cross the border illegally, you don't have to be vaccinated. And Jen said, yep, next question. I mean, it's like, did I just hear her say, yes, that's okay? I mean, there's at some point you have to say, wait a minute, we're talking about health. We're talking about COVID. We had 200,000 individuals cross the border, which was down, I think it was 208,000, which was just a little bit less than the all-time record the month before. So when we come back, we're going to talk about this issue of what would this issue of mass migration and illegal immigration do to the country. We'll be right back.
It was a shocking overreach when the president instructed the Labor Department to mandate that businesses with over 100 employees require that those employees receive COVID-19 vaccines or be subject to regular COVID testing. Penalties could hit $14,000 per violation. Medical providers that accept Medicare or Medicaid and federal workers are also required to be vaccinated, with no testing alternative. A vaccine mandate ignores the fact that millions of Americans have recovered from COVID and carry immunity, more robust immunity, recent studies show, than that conferred by vaccines. This decree also burdens businesses trying to recover from the economic effects of government-imposed lockdowns, followed by overly generous unemployment checks that have disincentivized many recipients from returning to work. New research reveals another reason for our enduring labor shortage. Moms are slow to return to the workplace, and many are deciding not to return at all. Meanwhile, Congress is considering another overreach, a massive spending package, on the premise that many of its proposals will get parents back to the office. Yet, as radio host Eric Erickson points out, the programs provided for in the House's budgeted $3.5 trillion are based on the way the world worked before the virus affected everyone's life. In insisting we need this spending, he said in a radio commentary, the left is skating to where the puck was, not where it's going to be. To take advantage of many of these proposed federal programs, he says, you must re-embrace a lifestyle that you rejected during the pandemic and don't want to go back to. Forced to supervise their kids' online learning, some parents didn't like what they saw in their kids' curriculum and are pulling their kids out of public schools. Some saw the benefit of being more involved in day-to-day teaching. Many are homeschooling now. Lots of moms have simply realized they're okay living on one income and won't be going back to work. And that's just great for their kids. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back for a few more minutes before the top of the hour. We're going to talk about the crisis at the border. This is something that we want to cover because it isn't really being covered very much by the mainstream media. And as I mentioned, we have 10,000 plus, even just a few days ago, I think it was at 10,500. So now people are talking about it being almost 12,000. But whatever the numbers are, they're just overwhelming. But we also had 208,000 individuals that were abducted. That means there are probably at least 300,000, 400,000 trying to cross that didn't get, when you have the total of those who were abducted and caught and those who weren't. So we're dealing with a crisis at the border. And it does seem to me that the solution coming from the Biden administration is let's give green cards and amnesty to everybody.
Yes, and the House Judiciary Committee last week introduced legislation that will be in the spending plan, the $3.5 trillion blowout spending plan, giving amnesty to, the dreamers, millions of dreamers, and it's more people than are just in the DACA amnesty that Obama and everybody else initiated. And also essential workers. If you're working in the U.S., you'll get a green card. And, they say, well, it's just a green card. It's not citizenship. They can't vote. But green cards are, they're sort of an entry-level way of moving up the citizenship system. Now, we want people to come in and show us that they love this country, and there are certain people that are going to get citizenship. But these numbers are ridiculous. And they're coming in overwhelming cities. And, the sad part is we don't want them under the bridge in these border towns, overwhelming the system. But we also don't want the U.S. government flying them all over the country and placing them in communities where we can't track them or find them. So, one of the points made in this piece, which is called Biden's amnesty will only make the border crisis worse, which it will. What are going to happen to these people? There's about 11 million immigrants already in the country that they're trying to give amnesty to. But, they say one of the arguments they make is that they're a bonus right now to our Social Security and Medicare systems. And that may be true because they're basically, many of them, those workers are young and they're still working. But if they do get amnesty, they will be here when they start needing all of that. And it's this piece has added it up and said it's going to end up costing taxpayers an additional $1 trillion over their lifetime. So, and then this is all, what's in the bill has to do with everything that happened before January of 2021. What about what's been happening since January under the Biden administration? As you said, there were 2 months in a row with 200,000 people coming in each of those months. So what it does is this type of thing doesn't say, let's do this in an orderly manner. It says, come, just y'all come. We're open for business.
Yeah, I mean, Kerby, your numbers that you gave right at the end, people might not have paid attention. There's over 200,000 people came here in August.
That's a population of Birmingham, Alabama. It's a little bit more than the population of Stockton, California, Anaheim, California. You start running the numbers. Every month we are putting
and compare it to
the
last
size of
year,
cities. Yeah.
Compared to just a year ago in August of 2020, it was 50,000.
Yes.
It's over 200,000.
Right.
And this is happening every month. I saw a report last night that although there's 10 to 12,000 from Haiti under that bridge, there's another 20,000 on their way.
Yep.
And so this is just going to continue to increase. And the thing is, I mean, look, President Trump struggled with how did he, how do you get a hold of this problem? Because you got these rulings that created difficulty for how restrictions could be done. And then, how do you solve it? Well, he actually figured, it took him a while and he took a lot of hits trying to figure out, but he figured out that he could go to these countries like Mexico and say, do you want aid from us? Like you're getting aid. If you want to continue to get aid, you're going to work with us on keeping these people from coming into our country. And it actually worked. I think everybody knew it worked. The thing that's unbelievable is this is not an accident. This is the actual intent of the Biden administration. Mm-hmm. The intent is to flood all these people. They're not just from Haiti. They're from the Middle East. Okay? We've got all kinds of people coming in over the border because they're just setting them free. And this is now going to burden every American. It's going to hurt anybody's ability to get a high-paying job because it's going to depress all the wages down. It's going to bring criminals in. It's going to bring terrorists in, all because this is illegal. Almost everybody's in favor of legal immigration, where you actually have an orderly process, where you bring in people that are going to be great for our country. But that's not what they're doing. And again, the problem is this is intentional. I think you start adding this, which the American people are seeing, to the Afghanistan situation and all these things that are going on. I just think a year from now there's going to be a backlash, maybe that we've never seen in the elections, because this is really radical stuff that's going on in front of our eyes.
As we've said before, if some of these people crossing the border were going to vote Republican, I think there would be more of an attention to these issues, don't you think? And again, just as Kelly was pointing out, we think of where we broadcast, 200,000. Well, that's kind of the population of Augusta, Georgia, where we have a network that carries us. I just mentioned Birmingham. That number is a little bit less than, for example, Stockton, California, or Charleston, South Carolina. But, I mean, start looking at places where people hear this program and realize this is as much as the entire population of that particular town or city.
In 1 month.
And then just to turn a blind eye to it is amazing to me that, first of all, the administration does it, but it's even more criminal that the media does it as well.
You know, what I'm finding interesting is they're talking about putting this amnesty for two groups, the essential workers and the dreamers, into the $3.5 billion welfare bill. And they want to pass this on reconciliation, which means it's budgetary. It has to pass muster that it only has to do with budget. And yet this is a policy decision. When you say that you're going to give people amnesty, that's way more than budgetary. Yet does it affect the budget? Oh, yes, it does. It certainly does. I mean, we have to take care of these people. They're going to get sick and go to hospitals. The kids are going to go to school. There's going to be all kinds of money spent on them. Some of them are going to need help, and our country is going to have to provide it. So it will be monetary, but it's also a policy decision. And so, I think, Kelly says, yes, he thinks that this type of thing is going to come back to bite them in the election. I'm hoping it comes back in the next couple of months and keeps them from passing this ridiculous boondoggle, because they're really doing it under it's very dishonest the way they're doing it, and I don't think that this is just budgetary.
Let me just mention that some of you might say, well, I'd like some facts and figures on that, and that's why we have actually posted, I think it's our 4th article here, about what the amnesty would do to the country. And I'll just give you one of the facts here. The Congressional Budget Office, which is always low, but I'll take their numbers, estimates that the Biden amnesty will cost taxpayers an additional $140 billion over 10 years for taxpayer-funded federal programs like food stamps, Medicare, Affordable Care Act, and everything else. So if you find yourself saying, I want to express my opinion to my member of Congress, they're going to be having some town hall meetings, and you might want to give them some facts. That's what we have available on our website at pointofview.net. As you go there, don't forget, we're still making available Joe Rosenberg's book, The Jerusalem Assassin. We'll talk more about it in the next hour, but I just want to let you know that's still there in case you'd like to get a copy. We have a lot more, and we'll cover that right after this.
We live in a digital generation. Point of View is reaching this often overly plugged-in generation with truth. You can keep up with us 24 hours a day using your phone, your tablet, your laptop, or your desktop. Search for the Point of View Radio Talk Show on Facebook, where you can keep up with today's issues, learn about current and upcoming guests by liking us on Facebook. Also, follow us on Twitter. Our handle is @PointOfViewRTS. That stands for Point of View Radio Talk Show. Learn, interact, make a difference with Point of View using new media. And here's one way you can make a big difference. Help us increase our reach by spreading the word among your friends. Share a Facebook post. Tag us in a tweet. With enough joining us to plant seeds, we'll see a tremendous harvest. Come on, it only takes a minute. Search for Point of View Radio Talk Show on Facebook, @PointOfViewRTS on Twitter, and subscribe to the Point of View Radio Talk Show channel on YouTube. Learn, interact, share. The Point of View Radio Talk Show. Point of View will continue after this.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
Thank you, Kerby, for everything that you have been doing. I appreciate all the work that you're doing, advocating for the Word of God. Thank you so much.
Point of View, I think, is absolutely necessary because it's a Christian perspective, a biblical worldview perspective, and receive very current, up-to-date information about what is really going on, week to week in our culture, which is changing so rapidly, and yet it's morally sliding backwards.
Yeah, I'm just, first of all, I thank you guys. Y'all's program is wonderful, and enjoy it every day. I learn so much every time I listen to it.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. Each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging. Apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Second hour, let's first of all open up the phones, give you a chance to join the conversation. We've talked about a number of things in terms of the military, in terms of mandates, in terms of immigration, but especially I'd love to get your thoughts about that. Should we grant amnesty to so many? And what should we do about our southern border, an issue that is hardly being discussed at all by the mainstream media, but we are going to cover that and have covered it, and want to get into some other issues that we haven't talked about this week, one of which is an indictment coming down from John Durham against an individual that worked for the firm that represented both Hillary Clinton and the Democratic National Committee. That indictment had to come down pretty soon because you have a statute of limitations, and you've heard us before say that we've been concerned about some of the people in sometimes the upper echelon of the FBI. I quoted Kelly about that. But you also noticed yesterday we were talking about some of the evidence coming in from Michaela Maroney, Simone Biles, and Ali Rashman about the fact that there were people at the FBI that knew that Larry Nassar were sexually abusing those women that were part of the U.S. women's gymnastics team, and either being convinced by the FBI that that was not a problem, or else telling the entire story and not getting any action on it, which led to the FBI Director Christopher Wray to say, "I'm deeply and profoundly sorry to each and every one of you," which is nice, but a little bit too late. And we now have this one indictment that came down. Certainly, maybe others may come down, but it's the investigation John Durham was doing even while Donald Trump was president.
Yeah, first of all, the three Olympic females gymnasts that you mentioned, I mean, they represent many, many more that this guy was abusing. And so, the reports were well more than those three, and they were ignored. It's really a sad, sad story. It's just it's very sad.
And the why is what's so surprising.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like what, at least with these other things, we understand the evil intent and political motive of, being partisans that are using the FBI, misusing the FBI,
yes,
and the CIA. But in this case, you're like, what is the motivation for listening to these unbelievable stories that they told the FBI, and then for the FBI to do nothing about it and to actually try to push it under the rug? I mean, that's the thing that's so, you almost would love to find why did they do this? Yeah,
and of course the culpability of the Olympic organization also is part of that. But as far as the Durham investigation, the grand jury has indicted this lawyer. He's a cybersecurity lawyer. His name is Michael Sussman, and he works for the, I don't know how you pronounce this, but is it Perkins Coie? Okay, yeah. Perkins Coie law firm. And they indicted him for making a false statement during a meeting with FBI officials before the 2016 election. He told them he wasn't representing any client. And he did provide evidence that a server for a Russian bank was communicating with the Trump computers. This turned out not to be of concern to the FBI, but he did lie about it because, as it turns out, he was building the Hillary Clinton campaign. And so they found this out, and they've now indicted him. And it's just, again, and, these are just lower-level FBI officials that were alerted to this, to your point. but there was no evidence of wrongdoing, but the lie is a wrongdoing. It's
Yes.
a piece of wrongdoing. So
And
what's going to happen now?
And if you go to the article, it also has a tweet that came from Hillary Clinton. Computer scientists have apparently uncovered a covert server linking the Trump organization to a Russian-based bank. Well, first of all, the computer scientists are the ones on her payroll, if you want to get down to it. Second of all, that whole issue of that bank, the so-called Alpha Bank, even at the time, I think some of us around the table thought that many of these statements were just fallacious. They were red herrings, and yet here we go, Kelly, a good example of individuals that just kept moving it down the road, and of course, in that particular case, maybe didn't result in the election of Hillary Clinton, but then we started seeing it play out over the next couple of years in terms of actually crippling the Trump not only campaign, but then his administration.
Yeah, this is this is one of those things that I think, again, Americans are losing their trust, their faith in a lot of different institutions very quickly, and the media would be one.
Sure.
I mean, unfortunately, right now, because of Dr. Fauci and the way the CDC has handled the pandemic, I think the American people are losing faith in science and doctors, because instead of being just honest and truthful, they're being politicians. They're leaving things out. They're doing things irrationally. And now, the FBI. And so this is really sad. You wish that somebody would come in, clean out, and we could actually, because these institutions are very important, and we're sort of very quickly losing all the institutions that have a lot of history and the American people had trusted overall. The FBI has had some problems in the past, but nothing like what we're seeing now and what happened starting with Trump. Really the politicization of the FBI and the CIA, and just how all of that worked. And Durham was the only hope of anything, and I don't know how much hope people have in him at this point. This has taken so long. But it's encouraging to at least see one of the bad actors. But I think people are looking for some major players, or else I think they're going to lose. Their credibility is not going to be restored anytime soon.
I think the question now, though, is what information can he give now? Now that he's been indicted, he is apparently fairly well connected, been around a while. So can he then, because it was just unbelievable how this hoax just mushroomed and developed, and there were so many efforts to tie Trump to nefarious activity. And, we're seeing that a lot of it was just made up out of whole cloth, and, others was just taking something out there that they thought they could get him on. And so there was so much of that. What can Michael Sussman provide as far as information, maybe to get himself less of a punishment, and cause this thing to get some momentum?
Yes. Well, again, we're talking about Fusion GPS and the dirty dossier. We're talking about FISA warrants and all the rest. And I would imagine that somebody listening to this program that hasn't been listening in the past go, I don't even know what you're talking about, because they're not talking about any of that on MSNBC. They're not talking about any of that on CNN. Yeah, that's right. And the fact is that if it weren't for a few investigators that have actually followed this and saw that there was some real significant problems with all of this Russian collusion, which was used as a justification for trying to get an impeachment. Well, when that didn't work, we'll impeach him then on a phone call to Ukraine. But we're going to ignore every other connection of the Biden family to Ukraine, right? And at that point, I think it kind of, as we said before, strains credulity. So I might just mention that next week we are going to be doing our Truth Team Week. And if nothing else, I hope that you value the fact that we're willing to trace down some of these stories that oftentimes are ignored by the mainstream press.
Yeah, I think, you tune into a lot of shows, and when you tune into Point of View, you get, perhaps more facts and a little bit of a long-form analysis of things, and also sometimes things that you just won't hear anywhere else.
Well, we have a lot more to cover. Penna Dexter has a piece on not going back, and got some other questions about a variety of other issues in the news. We'll take a break, come back with more right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
There are many modern conveniences we take for granted. Near the top of the list is light. To be more precise, we take for granted artificial light, except when our lights go out. But light as a product illustrates the benefits of modern technology. A story in Human Progress explains how light has turned from something too precious to use that's something everyone can afford. It used to take 10 hours a day for 6 days to produce 1,000 lumen hours of light. To put that in perspective, this is equivalent to one modern light bulb for just 54 minutes. When candles came along, this provided light for wealthier people, but that was prohibitively expensive for the common person. By the 18th century, candles made from the waxy substances in the head cavities of sperm whales were less time-consuming, but they were still expensive, not to mention terminal for the whales. George Washington even calculated the annual cost to him for the opportunity to have 5 hours of reading per night. The light bulb changed everything. By 1900, 60 hours of work could provide 10 days of light. 20 years later, 60 hours of work could pay for 5 months of light. Today, that same amount of work can produce 52 years of light. The amount of labor that once took 54 minutes of light now can buy 52 years of light. The cost has fallen by a factor of 500,000, and the quality of that light has been transformed from unstable and risky to clean, safe, and controllable. Sadly, many in other parts of the world don't have access to that light, which is even more reason for us not to take it for granted. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Go deeper on topics like you just heard by visiting pointofview.net. That's pointofview.net.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back once again, if you'd like to join our conversation, certainly put a lot on the table. And we want to put a few more things on the table, but let's give you a chance to join the conversation. We've been talking about everything from immigration to the indictment by John Durham and the actual jury itself. But what I thought was so interesting is, in addition to that indictment from the grand jury, we have some other facts that we might mention, one of which we talked about earlier in the week, and that is everybody said, okay, now we have the anniversary of 9/11, and that is the president decided to release some of the documents related to 9/11. I don't know if that will fuel conspiracy theories or end them, but there were some other documents having to do with all of this, Kelly, that you're familiar with, that were supposed to be released, and they're still being held up. Can you explain that?
Yeah, the president declassified a lot of information that was going to show a lot of what went on with the Russian hoax, and it was going to show a lot of people who were responsible. And that was released a few days before he left office, but the news reports are saying, and I don't know if it's true, are saying that his counsel, his White House counsel, has those and refused to release them, which he doesn't have the authority to do. And they were supposed to all be given to John Solomon, the investigative reporter,
who we've had on,
And John Solomon actually got some of the documents, and he was stating yesterday that there was a meeting, and that at that meeting he was given some, but they said all of them would be given to him, and they said some people in the room didn't trust that he would get everything, so they gave him what was there, but there's a much bigger load that's supposedly coming, and supposedly that you still got this problem with. This seems odd if it's the case with some attorney that was in the White House being able to not release the declassified documents that the President of the United States ordered be released. So I don't know where that's going, but there evidently is a whole lot of very detailed information, declassified information that would really sort of make this much clearer. A lot of what went on and a lot of the shenanigans that went on during the Trump campaign.
I might just mention that article. You can read it because it also quotes from other articles that talk about actions by the Clinton lawyer Mark Elias, also by people like John Podesta, who was actually involved with the Clinton campaign. And then the questions are about what was the Clinton campaign's role in the so-called Steele dossier or the dirty dossier, and on and on and on. And so it is a good example of there are some people in the press that still want to do investigative reporting, but most of them tend to be more on the conservative side than on the liberal side. Now, I will give props to Glenn Greenwald and a few others, but very, very few. The incredible lack of interest, for example, on the relationship between Joe Biden and his son in China, Joe Biden and his son in Ukraine. These are things you would think that a curious investigator for the press would want to talk about.
You would, and it's so interesting when we do find out things, how some of it just kind of floats away because I guess you can call it the mainstream media outlets. There are many media outlets now, so you can choose media outlets.
Corporate media, whatever.
But there are some that will cover this stuff if you find them and if those are who you follow. But the ones that the majority of Americans subscribe to, they just choose either not to speak about it or to downplay it. And so a lot of things that, Hillary Clinton can just stop talking about something or deny something, and it just goes away. No one calls her on it. It's just amazing.
Yeah, well, it's happened before. We've seen that.
Yeah, the thing that's interesting, though, is on the vaccines and the pandemic and a lot of the weird sort of mainstream media blocking and not talking about things that should be talked about and all that. There is a breakthrough on that occurring, right? You've got articles beginning to come out on things that we've been talking about on Point of View for a good long while. I mean, things like immunity and like how this doesn't make any sense. If you're going to have people have again, the whole idea is horrible. I don't know if you saw, but I don't know if it's a county or I think it was a county that came out with the fact that they have this new great system on people showing their vaccine immunity card or whatever. Their
card that shows they had the vaccine.
Yeah, they had the vaccine, and it was bragging about how it was so good. And the guy on the email responded, "Does it note whether you're a Jew or not?" And which just said it all. He was making his point very well. But why are you, even if that was a good idea, why are you talking about having people not be able to do things unless they have the vaccine when all the studies show so far, including the major one in Israel, shows that immunity is 27 times more effective than the vaccine? 27 times. So if you're just going by science and you want to force people to have cards, the immunity card trumps the vaccine card. So, but nobody talks about that, right? And none of the mainstream media. Well, yet today, the Washington Post has an article, right? And yes. I think you saw an article in Atlantic or other places.
About hospitals.
So we at least have somehow the mainstream media is beginning to have other articles on things that people would want to know that I don't know, there's some hope maybe that we'll eventually get back to a media that's not insane. Everybody kind of lost all their credibility and their integrity, it seemed like, during the Trump administration. They got so angry and so anti-Trump that they just went crazy. Maybe there's hope, but I don't know if there is or not. At least some of these articles are at least showing that maybe some people are starting to do their job.
Well, first of all, the mandate is just a way of ignoring everything that's true. It's ignoring that somebody has immunity. It's ignoring that somebody might have a health reason. Now they have to go through all sorts of hoops to try to get exempt because they've got a reason they shouldn't be taking the vaccine, and or they just don't want to take it. I mean, it's just taking away freedom. So the mandate is just the most awful idea. And the fact that some people are now interpreting the fact that Gavin Newsom kept his job in California to the fact that people want these mandates, I think that's a really dumb lesson to take out of that election. But we'll see. But now, you said the Washington Post, the article is natural immunity to COVID is powerful. Mm-hmm. Policymakers seem afraid to say so. And this article does say that Anthony Fauci now has hinted that the government may be rethinking its stance on natural immunity. He says, I think that's something that we need to sit down and discuss seriously. He's known since the beginning that natural immunity is protective. But, they, for some reason, and I really don't get the reason except for controlling perhaps the population, that they have ignored natural immunity. Maybe it's just more efficient, they think, to immunize everyone. But the American people are not necessarily going to go along. They don't always go along. And I think in this vaccine situation, we're finding the independence of the American. And I don't think that the corporate mandate that was announced last week that's going to go through OSHA, I think they're going to see a lot of pushback on that. They already are.
That quote from Anthony Fauci, I know where it came from because and let's give credit where credit was due, on CNN, Anderson Cooper had Sanjay Gupta, who is actually the medical reporter for CNN, and he asked that question because in light of the fact that we're seeing from Israel, I loved him quoting that, and he was quoting the one that had 17%. Right. So again, and whatever the percentage is, that one was 17%, showed natural immunity, and that's where you have the first time Tony Fauci saying, well, maybe we'll have to look at this. Like this is the first time he heard about that.
Yeah, I thought it was a really dishonest answer by Fauci. What he said is he couldn't deny the figures. 17 times.
Oh, that one was 17.
Yeah, or 27 times or 17 times is still ridiculous. What he said is, we'll have to look at that, study that more. And then he said, because we don't know if it wanes, if the immunity wanes.
It has durability.
Okay.
What about the vaccine immunity
That's
waning?
exactly right. So I said, wait a second. Let me have a conversation about this. So what you're saying is the immunity, which in SARS has been shown to usually last lifetime, you're not sure because you've done no studies on whether this one wanes or not. So you want to force people to take the vaccine where you know it wanes and where the studies show it wanes. I mean, this is obfuscation. This is him trying to create a cloud, kind of trying to figure out how to get out of that question. It was a really, I thought, dishonest answer, which is unfortunately become all too consistent with Fauci.
Again, if you're sitting here saying, I've got to read it for myself, the third article we've posted actually comes from a professor at the UCLA School of Medicine. And I think he does a very good job of actually raising some questions just from a scientific point of view about some of these mandates. Anyway, we'll continue that conversation right after this.
Having civil conversations about important issues seems to be harder and harder. Various media outlets tell people what they should believe, why they should be outraged, and getting people to actually think, well, it can be difficult. Whether it's the gospel, tax issues, social policy, or just about anything else, you need to have solid information and clear thinking to address the hard issues. You need God's truth applied. And that's what you get in less than 2 minutes with Point of View's Viewpoints Commentary, a daily resource to help you be informed and think through the things we need to be talking about. It is free and will arrive in your inbox each day when you visit pointofview.net/signup. Sometimes we know we should say something, but we're silent because we're not quite sure what to say. Viewpoints Commentary can help you break the silence and change the narrative. It can make you a more equipped agent for truth. Get your free subscription to the Viewpoints Commentary at pointofview.net/signup. Pointofview.net/signup. Point of View will continue after this.
are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
About a half hour, if you'd like to join the conversation, 1-800-351-1212. Penna Dexter, Kelly Shackelford. We're going to get to Penna's commentary today, not going back in just a minute. But as we were going to the break, I did mention one of the articles you might want to read for yourself, and it is written by Dr. Joseph Ladapo, who you might say is really kind of an expert on this. He's associate professor at UCLA's David Geffen School of Medicine, and he really just takes on this idea that really would vaccine mandates work, which is a sort of a setup for what Penna's going to be covering in just a minute. But he talks about the fact that the argument for the mandates are that you have no right to infect me. But cases, he says, are partially driven by asymptomatic and pre-symptomatic spread, people who are completely unaware that they're infected in the first place. And so he says it isn't even practical to punish people who have no symptoms. And so that's the first issue. Going a little further down, he quotes from the new governor. We remember we have a new governor in the state of New York, and she actually said that the reason they are expanding vaccine mandates is because we have to let people know when they walk into our facilities that people that are taking care of them are themselves safe themselves and will not spread this. He says, in fact, the data says they can and will spread it. Now, does that mean you shouldn't get the vaccine? No, because I think he would argue for that. But he's saying that these mandates are based upon this assumption. And when you've had the current president say that if you get vaccinated, you will never get sick, well, we know that's not true for sure. And when he says, well, we need to make sure everybody's vaccinated so that the unvaccinated people don't infect the vaccinated people. Well, I mean, somewhere along the line, we have to get back to science.
But we have to mandate vaccines still.
Yes. I mean, so I don't know.
Crazy.
Yeah, it really is crazy. And even as we talked about the other day, we have some people that have super immunity against this that just got the genetic lottery, and they are almost always asymptomatic. Then we talked about the people that have had the disease that now have natural immunity. And then we've talked about, the other day, there was a study about hybrid immunity. Some people that have natural immunity and have the vaccine might have maybe a synergistic effect. So the bottom line is, anytime somebody says they figured it all out, no, they haven't. And I did a commentary about the fact that there is need right now for a lot more humility and a lot less finger pointing right now.
Yeah, and add to that things like, what if you're young? And there's that study that shows, the 600% increase in the what is it called? Carditis with your heart. So if you're young, you've got something even more to think about, which is why you don't.
And you're probably not going to get a bad case of COVID.
Exactly. You start looking at the danger, and you look. So the point of these mandates is it's a bad idea, period. But it's especially a bad idea for the government to control everybody's health care in a one-size-fits-all, where you don't even talk to your doctor, you don't even look at your current situation. It's sort of, they've kind of done themselves a lot of bad by just intentionally ignoring natural immunity. Because then the American people look at this and they say, well, this is just irrational. This doesn't make any sense. So I'm not going to trust anything you got to say about my health care. But you need to be able to look at all these things, and people need to make decisions. And people, in a free country, people are able to make their own decisions. The funny thing is, it's like what it should be is if the vaccines are protective, then the only thing that the unvaccinated do, the unvaccinated who have no immunity and all that, is all they're going to do is harm themselves. So what are you worried about if you're vaccinated? But again, irrational. You have to I think one of the words in the president's crazy speech he gave was the vaccinated have to be protected from the unvaccinated. It's like, well, why did you get vaccinated? I think you did so to be protected. So there's just a lot of nonsense going on. And I appreciate doctors and others willing to, even like in the Washington Post. I mean, that was an important article on immunity that People start looking at all the factors and making good decisions. By the way, I also think the Biden, what he said in his speech that he's going to do, he hasn't done it yet. We get a lot of calls from people saying, "Hey, I have a business of more than 100 people, and what do I do?" It's like, well, you don't have to do anything yet because there is no OSHA regulation yet. They're working on it. He acted like it was law. Now, I think as soon as that's issued, if it's anything like what he described, I think it's going to be struck down all over the country. I think it's going to be enjoined all over the country.
I think so.
Number one, health and safety is a state power, not a federal government power. Number two, it doesn't, even if they had the power, you can't do it by fiat from some executive office. It would have to go through the legislative process. So there's all kinds of problems with this, no matter which way you look at it. And I think what will happen is and by the way, for instance, OSHA applies to churches. Okay, so this is the federal government telling a church how to run, their church. Again, there's just so many problems when you have the federal government try to take everything over when they have zero. Please, somebody tell me in the Constitution where they have the power to do this. Point to the provision.
Yeah.
I see one on the border, on immigration.
Which they're ignoring.
I see one on interstate commerce. But I don't see anything about health. I don't see anything about vaccines. I don't think the federal government does not have this power. Yeah. And everybody will point to, well, there's a Supreme Court case that says you can mandate vaccinations. It was a state legislature. Okay. Two big problems that Biden, doesn't jump those hurdles. So I want people to know, number one, the regulation is not even out. But number two, I think it's going to be immediately enjoined all over the country.
I would think so. Penna, I want to come to your piece because, first of all, we encourage people to sign up to get our Viewpoints commentary. Yours will arrive in anybody's inbox if they sign up today, but it's entitled Not Going Back. And by the way, if you're listening on your computer, in just about 3 minutes, we'll have a chance to hear the commentary, but give us a preview of what you are actually talking about.
Well, people have noticed, I think, that if you are trying to buy something or if you're out trying to go to the restaurant that you used to go to or the store you used to go to, that we just don't have everybody back at work. And there are labor shortages all over the country. There are more jobs out there than people that are willing to take them. And so, we do have that. And so I think it's interesting that that this directive to the Labor Department was given by President Biden. That's not going to help that situation because people that don't want to get the vaccine, they may just stay away from work a little bit longer so they don't have to get it. So that's one thing. But I think there are other reasons for our labor shortage, and that's what I try to highlight in my piece. And one of them is that moms are being slow to return to the workplace. And some of them are deciding not to return at all. And, when you have this $3.5 trillion bill, spending bill with all kinds of welfare benefits, one of the excuses for doing it is to get people back to work. We need to get people back to work. We need to provide daycare. We need to provide all kinds of things to do that. But I read this, Eric Erickson, who's a radio host, pointed out that a lot of these programs in there are actually based on the way things were before the pandemic. And now that we see these parents who have been home with their kids, they've seen that you could do homeschooling. You can actually oversee your child's education, and it kind of works out well. They don't like what they heard being taught to their children at school, all the critical race theory and all of that. And so you are having many, many moms deciding that it's just going to be better for their family, and they actually are doing okay on one income. They're not going to go back. And so, it's just, I guess, just to the point that I wanted to make that Eric Erickson also made is that to go back, you rejected this lifestyle during the pandemic. We don't need to spend $3.5 trillion to give you all the services to enable you to go back and be in the workplace, because a lot of people just don't want to be. And it's really actually a good thing. It's always a good thing when moms spend more time with their kids.
I think so. One of the quotes from Eric Erickson, it's a Wayne Gretzky quote, that the left is not skating to where the puck is. You're supposed to skate to where the puck is going to be. It's an old Wayne Gretzky quote for those of you that love hockey. And it's a good example. We're trying to spend money on something we don't need to spend money on. So Penna Dexter's commentary. And if you're listening online right now, you can actually listen to it. Not Going Back by Penna Dexter. And as I've said before, if you do sign up, we send those commentaries to you. Mine Monday through Friday, Penna Dexter's on Saturday, but if you'd like to listen to it right now, it's just a great illustration of that. And when we come back, I thought for just a minute we'd talk about the importance of courage. We sometimes quote from an individual that actually received the Bradley Prize, and I thought you might be interested in hearing from Molly Hemingway. We'll talk about that right after this.
It was a shocking overreach when the president instructed the Labor Department to mandate that businesses with over 100 employees require that those employees receive COVID-19 vaccines or be subject to regular COVID testing. Penalties could hit $14,000 per violation. Medical providers that accept Medicare or Medicaid and federal workers are also required to be vaccinated, with no testing alternative. A vaccine mandate ignores the fact that millions of Americans have recovered from COVID and carry immunity, more robust immunity, recent studies show, than that conferred by vaccines. This decree also burdens businesses trying to recover from the economic effects of government-imposed lockdowns, followed by overly generous unemployment checks that have disincentivized many recipients from returning to work. New research reveals another reason for our enduring labor shortage. Moms are slow to return to the workplace, and many are deciding not to return at all. Meanwhile, Congress is considering another overreach, a massive spending package, on the premise that many of its proposals will get parents back to the office. Yet, as radio host Eric Erickson points out, the programs provided for in the House's budgeted $3.5 trillion are based on the way the world worked before the virus affected everyone's life. In insisting we need this spending, he said in a radio commentary, the left is skating to where the puck was, not where it's going to be. To take advantage of many of these proposed federal programs, he says, you must re-embrace a lifestyle that you rejected during the pandemic and don't want to go back to. Forced to supervise their kids' online learning, some parents didn't like what they saw in their kids' curriculum and are pulling their kids out of public schools. Some saw the benefit of being more involved in day-to-day teaching. Many are homeschooling now. Lots of moms have simply realized they're okay living on one income and won't be going back to work. And that's just great for their kids. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back for a few more minutes. Let me just mention real quickly that we certainly have, of course, Truth Team next week. And one of the themes that has been running through this year is the idea of discernment and the need for us to get news and information that's true and accurate. We want you to have discernment in terms of what you see, read, and hear. But the other theme that seems to surface time and time again, and maybe it goes back to some of the comments about live not by lies and we will not be silenced, whether you're quoting from some of the authors that we have such high respect for, is the need for courage. And so I came across what essentially was the text of the speech given by Molly Hemingway. Now, both Penna and Kelly have had a chance to hear her speak. We've quoted her a couple of times on this program. She's written some books and obviously has been very involved in becoming courageous and being a good example. But Penna, I was really struck by the fact that she really used the acceptance of what was called the Bradley Prize, the Bradley Prize in her acceptance speech, really talk about the need for us to have courage. And so I thought we might end with that because it is a very important lesson that we need to apply. And just the other day, Dennis Prager was saying, of all the virtues, the one that seems to be shortest in supply right now is the virtue of courage.
Well, I think the left is trying to intimidate people. And some people are going to rise up with courage, like the person we talked to at the very beginning of this program, Coach Kennedy. I mean, for 6 years, he's been battling for his job. And he's old enough now that I don't think he really needs to work anymore. But he is doing it for the country. And you have to have courage to win these battles more and more today. So we have him, and we have the whole woke culture that tries to intimidate people into these, ridiculous positions on things and in not speaking the truth. And so if people don't have courage, we're going to be living by lies. As Solzhenitsyn said, as Rod Dreher has been writing about and speaking about. And, a lot of times when I write my commentaries, I get to the end of it and I think, wow, if I want people to act on this or stand up against this, it's going to be hard for them. They're going to have courage. So I'll say something about courage at the end. Well, I mean, Molly Hemingway, she's a senior editor at the Federalist, and she's also a Fox News contributor. And she just filled this speech with encouragements and reasons that we need courage. And she began, and Kelly can, pick up on some of this too, but she began talking about her brother who was small for his age, and some of the older boys stole something. And so their father later taught him a little bit, what he should do in the face of bullies. If you allow the bullying to go on, you're going to get more of it. And if we're allowed to be bullied by the left and the demands that we use a certain pronoun, that we accept something that is antithetical to our faith, that we allow our children to be indoctrinated in schools, that we that we sit down when we're mandated to get a shot that we don't necessarily think people should have to do. I mean, there's just so many things right now in the culture that I consider bullying from the progressives against the normal, regular people in America. If we allow it, it's going to get bigger, and we're going to have tyranny, and the whole country will change. So I think that her speech, and you just need to read it. For instance, here's one paragraph. We live in a time when people act like stating one's sexual preferences or whatever pronouns they're using this week is courageous. She said, I prefer David Azarad's definition that courage is the bold and principled defiance of the lies of the age. We are living by lies when we allow all of this. And I think we're at a crucial, pivotal moment right now. And we do need people of courage. And, I've got a bunch of grandkids, and I just keep thinking about the kind of courage they're going to need to grow up. And how do we instill that in kids? Well, I think one way to do it would be to give all your kids that are old enough to understand Molly Hemingway's speech.
Yeah, I do think the big issue right now for the future of our country is not an issue. It's courage. I think most Americans know what's right, but that doesn't mean they're willing to say it.
Yeah.
And again, in the Live Not by Lies, I think an important point in that Solzhenitsyn makes is it doesn't take a majority. It just takes enough people to speak the truth. And then it kind of relieves everybody else, and they joined, and they speak the truth. They see the emperor has no clothes, but somebody's got to say it. And how many people know the difference in America between a male and a female? How many people are willing to say or call, lie on when somebody tries to act like there is no difference? And, it reminds me a little bit of when I've given graduation speeches at seminaries or at Christian schools or whatever, advice to people, going out to try to make a difference for the gospel. I usually focus on a couple of things. One is their talents or their gifts, because a lot of times we want to know God's will, but you want to know the most particularized expression of his will. It's how he made you, because you're different. And so you need to use those gifts because he made you to use those gifts. But I then come to the second point, and this is what I always say, because I got so many cases that I can give examples of people who are like Coach Kennedy and Gail Blair, the blind woman who was told to basically shut up for 2 years and not share the gospel. And I could go through story after story, right? But my point is, even if you get to the point where you're using your gifts that God created for you to use to change the world, the enemy is going to try to intimidate you. So if you are not willing to walk in courage, you're really never going to make your mark. You're really never going to do what God wants you to do. And that's where we are as a country right now. So what's true for our country is what's true for every Christian. If you're really going to have impact, you have to have courage. You have to be willing to put your faith in God and trust the results to him and not what it looks like might happen to you. You have to be willing to suffer. You don't know if you're going to suffer, but that's the whole point of being a Christian, is being willing to do what's right no matter what the consequences, following the Lord no matter what being obedient no matter what that means. And that's where we are as a country right now. And the future and whether our kids and grandkids are going to have the country we had is going to depend upon whether people are willing to do that.
She had a particular word for conservatives in the country, which, it was pretty, it was kind of a dig at some conservatives who she says are sort of surrendering and managing. They're negotiating the terms of surrender. Mm-hmm. They're managing defeat. They really don't see that they can make a difference. So they are just trying to maybe mitigate the damage. And she says, that, that is not where we should be standing right now. We need to be standing, and even at the risk of perhaps losing our job. I mean, the prices are getting steeper for standing for the truth. But there have to be some Americans, and many, more than are now, standing up at the risk of loss. And so that was her encouragement. She says it's not comfortable sometimes for conservatives who value order and civility to do this, but they need to get out of their box and do it.
As Kelly said, too, it's also contagious. That's a quote from Pat Buchanan. Courage is contagious. Defiance will lead to a recovery of will. So lots of great quotes in here. Wish we had more time. Next week is, of course, our Truth Team. I won't have you guys with us because I know you both be at different events, but it's certainly great to have you here. And Kelly, one last time, they can go to First Liberty to find all the things we've talked about.
Absolutely. FirstLiberty.org. And especially, I know there's a lot of questions people have about the vaccine mandates, and there's a kit that will answer all those questions for people.
And we have those links on the website. So I hope you enjoy the weekend. Next week, of course, we're going to be hearing from just all sorts of individuals that will be encouraging you to support this ministry. But at the same time, we're going to be hearing from them about what they think are some of the biggest battles we'll be fighting here in 2021 and in the future. So have a great weekend. I want to thank Andrew and Steve for their help behind the scenes. We will see you back here on Monday right here on Point of View.
Having civil conversations about important issues seems to be harder and harder. Various media outlets tell people what they should believe, why they should be outraged, and getting people to actually think, well, it can be difficult. Whether it's the gospel, tax issues, social policy, or just about anything else, you need to have solid information and clear thinking to address the hard issues. You need God's truth applied. And that's what you get in less than 2 minutes with Point of View's Viewpoints Commentary, a daily resource to help you be informed and think through the things we need to be talking about. It is free and will arrive in your inbox each day when you visit pointofview.net/signup. Sometimes we know we should say something, but we're silent because we're not quite sure what to say. Viewpoints Commentary can help you break the silence and change the narrative. It can make you a more equipped agent for truth. Get your free subscription to the Viewpoints Commentary at pointofview.net/signup. pointofview.net/signup. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
Thank you, Kerby.